Potlucks are always great. I love them. They're a reminder of how overflowing good things can be when we're together as a church family. It's always great to get there and see all those wonderful things we can share. And inevitably, you go away from a potluck saying, oh man, I ate enough for a couple of days. I shouldn't have eaten quite so much. But it's sure good going down, isn't it? Well, God gives us gifts that are good going in, and they don't overfill you, and they just fill you with joy that can overflow to others. That's what he loves to do, to give us his gifts. He's always been that way, to give gifts that aren't deserved. We think about the Israelites. In this lesson today, the gospel reading from Matthew 15, there's this contrast between the Jews and the Gentiles. And as we consider this difference, we may have a hard time understanding why he is the way he is. Especially for us, most of us here, probably non-Jewish people, we may read this and say, this is just kind of weird. What's he talking about? Because in this passage, he's talking about it's not right to give the gifts of the children to the little dogs. He's talking about those who aren't Jewish people being kind of like dogs. They're not worthy of anything. He's talking about you and me. You know, we are the ones that don't deserve anything from him at all. We are not part of that nation of Israel that God blessed so abundantly. Remember when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt? They went through the sea, and God took care of them through the wilderness wanderings, and he promised them, I'm going to bring you into a good land filled with milk and honey, a wonderful, beautiful place, and I'm doing this all for you just because I love you. They didn't deserve it. They weren't worthy of it. They weren't anything that special, but he chose them and wanted to bless them. And that's how God often functions. And that's really what was behind this story and this account in Scripture, this true story of what happened on fleeing the land of Egypt. It was God's way of showing, I do what I do because I want to, whether you deserve it or not. That's the way I am. And I believe he chose Israel because they were such a rebellious people and so stubborn. He gave them the gift of his 10 commandments to guide them in a good way to walk in relationship with him. Did they keep those commandments? Not at all. Not even Moses, who received them. He was rebellious and arrogant and took things on himself and tried to do things his own way. None of the Israelites could live up to what God expected of them. And we can't either. So being worthy of God's love, it's not because of us and how good we are. Wasn't true for Israel, and especially not true for you and me here today. We're losers on two accounts. One, we're not Israelites by birth, so we don't have that right to say, I'm a descendant of Abraham. We can't even claim that unless there's someone here that I don't know that has that. If you do, great. But still, you're a loser even if you are a descendant of Abraham, because you're a sinner like the rest of us here. And that's the other reason we don't deserve God's gifts. We don't keep those commandments like we should. We don't put God first. We put ourselves first. We do things our own way. We reject God. So, is there any hope for us? Absolutely. Because he loves to give his gifts. That's what he did with Israel, and that's what he does with you and me today. He loves to give gifts even though they're not deserved. It's when we humble ourselves and acknowledge, I don't deserve it, Lord, that he says, right on. And now here's the gift for free because I want to give it to you, even though you don't deserve it. That's what Jesus earned for us when he died on the cross and rose from the grave. He did it so he could give us the gifts, so he could give us what we don't deserve because he earned it for us in our place. Jesus made all people right with God. That's why he came. God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Note the last word on that little blackboard there is what? World. Who's that include? Everyone. Jews? Yes. Gentiles? Yes. You and me? Yes. Jesus did that for the whole world. Everyone who would live in the past, future, present, everywhere. Jesus paid the price for all of us. And it's because of what he did that we can now be right with God. And this is what St. Paul came to proclaim to people like you and me, as he said here in our epistle reading today, Romans chapter 11, I am an apostle to the Gentiles. God sent him, that's what apostle means, a sent one. God sent him to speak that good news for non-Jewish people just like you and me. Because God loves the world, every one of us. Some Jewish people may say, no, the gifts are only for us. We're the chosen ones. Yes, they're chosen ones, but he shows all over the place that his gifts aren't just for them. In fact, he chose them because they were so weak, so that every weak person in the world could know they are worthy of God's love as a gift, not earned, not deserved, but received freely. And now that's how Jesus treats each one of us as he acts with grace. God's riches, all of his treasures at Christ's expense. He paid the full price for you and for me. As we hear in Romans 3:28, we maintain that a man is justified by faith apart from observing the law. As we come to him in humble faith, we are made right with God. We're able to be blessed by him abundantly. And Jesus offers that to anyone who will humbly come to him and who will receive his gifts. This woman in our gospel reading today is a beautiful example of this. She comes to Jesus begging him, please help me. My daughter and I, we need your help. We can't get free from our predicament by our own power. We need you. And what was the answer of the disciples to that when this Gentile Canaanite woman came begging? Get rid of her, Jesus. She's annoying. She's bothering us. Jesus sounds like he's going along with them at first. I came only for the lost sheep of Israel, he says. What's he getting at? He's trying to make it clear that the way we think isn't necessarily the right thinking. He's saying, yes, I came for those lost sheep of Israel. That's my primary purpose. But he's also showing that there's plenty of his love even for those who weren't part of Israel. Because he goes on in this discussion about it's not right to take the children's bread and give it to their little dogs. Now, this word little dogs here that is used in the text is kind of interesting. It's not a derogatory term in the way that we would normally think of. It's not where you have these little junkyard dogs that are just mongrels that are filthy, awful, terrible creatures, and especially where they're mean and very dangerous. Instead, he's picturing this term is cute little dog that's kept in the house as the pet. You know those little white ones that they have that they carry around in their little bag and they take them on a plane with little bows in their hair and all that? That's what you should think of here. Okay, maybe some of you guys are saying, I don't want to be that. All right, maybe it's that little chihuahua. All right, a little nasty guy that's got an attitude, but he's loved so much and babied all the time. These are those special little dogs that live under the table, and everyone, even though you're not supposed to, just throws a little bit of the leftovers to the dog, you know, and if it's like our dog, when anything green comes down, I'm not touching it. But if anything, meat, oh yeah, that's mine. So those little scraps that go down, this is what Jesus is getting at. It's not right to take all these and the good gifts that are on the table and give them to the dogs. But this woman says, yes, I agreed. I agree with Jesus. I don't deserve it. But even those little dogs, they get the crumbs that fall off the table. They get the scraps that are left over. That's all I'm looking for. Because I know that even the scraps are enough for me. Because your scraps are so wonderful, they will bless me more than I can imagine. That's the attitude we should have, is I don't deserve all the blessings of God at all. But if you'll just give me the little scraps, that's enough. Because those can fill me for everlasting joy in your presence. And it fills us with that joy of walking with God. That's really what this is all about, is having that unbridled joy like a little dog. I think that's where Jesus is going with this little illustration. Those little dogs, if you've ever experienced one yourself or have one of those little dogs, they are typically just carefree and happy all the time. Hey, life's a wonderful joy today. I'm here again. Same thing over and over all the time, but I love it, and I'm happy to see you, Master. What can I do for you today? They love to be loved. We were just visiting our daughter, Hannah, down in Missouri, and she's got this a little dog named Phoebe now that's about 8 months old. And Phoebe is just a nut. She's crazy. But she loves attention. And she just runs up and jumps up, and she's just so happy every time. It's like, wow, I've never seen you before. Who are you? What's going on? Even though you just saw her 20 minutes ago, she's still that way. And she's just thrilled to see anybody. And if you pet her a little bit, she just gets so excited. And you pick her up and hold her, and she just kind of melts in your arms. And she loves to be loved. That's how we should approach Jesus. That we know he loves us, and we're glad he loves us, and we go to him and say, oh, it's so good to see you again, Jesus. I just can't wait to be with you. I just love to be around you. And anything you give me, that'll be enough, because I know you'll take care of me. We have that. Rejoice. You are a blessed little dog under the table of the Lord. And that's a great place to be. Not a care in the world, not a worry, because you are taken care of by the most loving master of all, Jesus Christ. But that leads to responsibility for us as Christians. We are not to keep those gifts to ourselves. This was a lesson Jesus was trying to teach his disciples. How dare you think we should send this woman away? That's what he was subtly trying to teach them. Even this woman who may be considered a dog in your eyes is worthy to be treated like that precious little pet. And we should never drive any such one away, but reach out and welcome them with love and hold them in our arms. And that's what Jesus is trying to say to them. We in the church can have a problem. Sometimes we can be rather exclusive with our gifts. And we can close in on ourselves and stand in a circle like this. We're hand in hand and arm, but we got our back to the world and we're not letting go for the risk that something unclean or bad might creep in and corrupt our goodness that we have in our little circle. Guess what? We're bringing filth into it every day ourselves. So we shouldn't think we're so perfect that we can't include anyone because they're not worthy. Everyone deserves to be in this circle. We should turn it around and open it up and reach out to the world and say, come on in, welcome. We want you here in God's house. You are no worse than I am. You are no more a mongrel, rotten dog than I am. You are a precious little puppy who's ready to be loved by Jesus and welcomed in his arms. And that's how we should welcome the unclean, the sinners, the rotten ones, those that the world is identifying as undeserving of God's love. Especially in our Christian circles, we can identify people that way of, oh, that's one of those people. That's someone who does those things. That's someone who thinks that way. They're the ones who need to be told how precious they are to God, that they are precious little puppies deserving to be held in his arms. We have been called by God to do that, to go out and welcome everyone into his family. Some would say, well, I don't want to do that. My church won't be the same anymore. I've heard that so many times in the last 30 plus years of ministry. Well, my church just isn't what it used to be. Guess what? It never was your church in the first place. It's Jesus' church. And if you think you can hold on to my church, you're mistaken, because it's not yours. It's his. And guess what? He loves to welcome the outcasts and the newcomers and the oddballs and the strange ones like me. He wants them all in his family. And so if you want to be part of his church, which is the only place to be, we need to be more open and welcoming to everyone into his church. We pray that God can help us to do that more readily, that he will break down our self-focus, our judgmental attitudes toward others, our fears of losing what we cherish. You won't lose anything, not of what matters. You already have what matters. You've got more than just a jumbo loaf of bread. We may say, oh, that's mine. I'm holding on to it. I don't want anyone to take my good stuff. Forget about just the loaf. We got the whole feast. We got a pizza buffet. Every kind on the table and no limit to it. I love pizza night here at church when we have that, where we can come up and go down the buffet line and have as much as you want, enjoy all the varieties. You know, God has something even better for us. And he promises he will always have enough to fill you and enough to overflow to those that you will invite to come with you. So join me as we enter into this fall season ahead of us and really look at the people around you. Who is a hungry, scared little puppy hiding under the table, starving because no one's even given them a crumb? And call them in and say, hey, I got something good. I've got some good crumbs that I get to share with you. And they're pretty awesome. You belong in Jesus' arms. Come on in. And let's welcome them and invite them. This fall, our theme will build on where we were last year, where we were talking about covering the next generation, especially those little ones who may feel lost and confused in such a broken world. Welcome them. Show them the love of Jesus. Do your job in your own home to equip that generation with this kind of unconditional love, and invite others around you to come into that love as well, from the youngest to the oldest. Welcome them in and say, come on in. And this fall, we're going to focus on equipping the next generation. That means we need to be equipped. So keep coming yourself to receive God's gifts, to know how to love the world, and then go out and pass that on to others of every generation. May God give us that kind of loving attitude. It's not chintzy with God's gifts, but instead says there's enough for everyone. A feast. A whole loaf and more. A pizza buffet with no limit and no calories. Awesome. May God bless us as we share his gifts to overflowing with all the little puppies who are loved by Jesus, just like we are held in his arms. Let us bring them in to be held as well.